Okay, so in the last session, we discussed about the concept of machine independent features of assembler. In that, we have seen three different concepts, right? So we are considering this as machine independent features of assembler because, as I said, they are not exactly dependent on the hardware of the machine. So they are basically providing convenience for the programmer. So this is one of the concept that we are supposed to discuss. Under that, we have already discussed about literals. So what do you mean by literal? So literal is something that you specify literally in an instruction, and they are going to be assembled just like a label or a symbol by the assembler. So that is one of the advantage. So literal is actually identified by an equal to symbol, and whenever you specify a literal, then the assembler would actually generate an address for that particular value, and then it's going to use that address to assemble the instruction. So this is how the literals are actually handled by the assembler. Okay, you can see here in an example, there is an instruction called as LDA. So earlier this was actually considered as EOF or something like that, but now the value has been literally specified in the instruction. Okay, so this is one of the advantage. Just a second. You're able to hear me, right? Is my voice too low or is it okay? Okay. So as I was saying, we are looking at the concept of literal. So it can be specified directly in an instruction by using the equal to symbol. So the assembler is going to generate an address for that, and that address is going to be used for the assembly process, right? So that is one of the advantage. So we also discussed about the difference between an immediate operand and an literal. So when it comes to an immediate operand, the immediate operand is going to be a part of the instruction directly. No address is going to be generated for that. But when it comes to a literal, a separate address is going to be generated, and then that address is going to be used in order to assemble the instruction. So this is one of the major difference between immediate operand and a literal. So coming to the way literals are actually handled. Now normally the literals are assembled or assigned address at the end of the program. So this is normally done. But if you want to change that, then what you can do is you can use an assembler directive called as LTORG. So this LTORG is going to place the literal immediately after this. So whatever literal values the assembler has seen so far until the LTORG statement, the LTORG after the LTORG statement, the assembler is going to place all the literal values. So this is one of the advantage that we have by using LTORG statement. Okay, like for example, you can observe here. So this is the start of the program. So from the start of the program, we can see that there is only one literal, and we don't want this literal to be placed at the end of the program. So what to do is we will actually use the LTORG statement here. So once the LTORG statement is encountered, the assembler knows that the literal values that it has seen so far has to be placed here itself. Okay, so it's going to place the literal value here, and it's going to generate the address for that, and in the second pass it's going to be assembled. Okay, so this is how you can actually ensure that the literal pool, right? So it's called as a literal pool. So the literal pool can be placed anywhere in the program by making use of the LTORG statement. So this is one thing that you need to remember. And when and where to use, we have already discussed about that, and how the assembler handles the literal duplicate values are also have been discussed. Okay, so there is one data structure that is actually used by literal, which is called as littab. So that actually stores the name of the literal, the value of the literal, the length of the literal, and the address that is assigned to it. and during pass 1 the literal table is going to be filled up by the assembler, and during pass 2 it is going to be used in order to generate the object code. So that is how literals are actually handled. So we also saw two symbol defining statements. One of them was equate, which is used to define a symbol and assign value to it. So this is the syntax that we are supposed to follow. And we also saw one more, which was org, which is used to assign address indirectly. Okay, and this is the syntax that we are supposed to follow, right? So now both of them are used to define symbols in your program, and as I said, it can be utilized in your programs in order to define symbol values or register values. Okay, or you can also assign or give names to registers. So like this, it can be utilized. And org can be used where you need clear definition. Okay, because it resets the value of the location counter. You need to be very careful with that, and you are supposed to assign the value. So we discussed the application of org for this particular table. So this is how it is done for a table using equate assembler directive, and this is how it is done for the same table using org. So we first initialize the memory or reserve the memory for that table, then we reset the value back, and then we define the columns. Okay, so this is how we had done that. So when you're using the symbol defining statement, you need to be very careful, because whatever value you are equating or calling as an operand in org statement, you need to ensure that those values are already defined. Okay, like for example, here you can observe alpha reserve word 1. Okay, it's there, and then beta equated to alpha. So obviously alpha is defined first, so beta can be assigned that value of alpha. But here beta is equated to alpha, but alpha is defined later. So at this point, you will not know what is the value of alpha. So obviously you cannot assign the value of alpha to beta. So it may take more than 2 pass over the program in order to assign value to it. Okay, so this is one thing that you need to ensure, that whatever value you are equating to or whatever value you are using for resetting the value of location counter, that value should be already defined. Means the statement should be ahead of calling org. Okay, so this is one thing that we need to ensure. Okay, now coming on to our next concept, which is called as expressions. So this is also one machine independent feature of an assembler, and we can actually make use of expressions in our program. Okay, so what do you mean by an expression? Expression can be anything, like an arithmetic expression or a expression that involves some labels or symbols or whatever it is. So you can actually use that, and the assembler is going to allow you to use expression in an operand in the instruction. So means in the operand place you can write any expression. But however, whenever you are writing an expression, that expression will be evaluated. Okay, and its value is going to be brought down to a single operand value or an address before it is assembled or before it is being used. So normally what type of expressions can you expect? You can expect arithmetic expressions from the program, and they can be written using all the normal arithmetic operations, plus, minus, star, and slash. Of course, when you're using division, you should ensure that it gives you some integer results, and whatever terms you are using in the expression, they can be constants, or they can be symbols, or they can be special terms. Now when it comes to special terms, the only special term that you are allowed to use is star. Now this is completely different from this star in arithmetic. So star actually means the current value of location counter. So whenever you are using star in the operand, so that actually involves, or that actually assigns the value of location counter to the symbol that you are trying to define using it. Okay, like let me show you an example here. See, look at the statement, buffend equated to star. Okay, so what is star? Star is current value of location counter. So suppose, for example, if location counter value is 1000, then buffend will be assigned the value of 1000. Suppose if location counter value is 2000, buffend will be assigned the value of 2000. Okay, so star is a special symbol that we can actually make use of in order to assign address. Okay, you can also treat it like an expression. Okay. Now, when you're using symbols in your program, now remember that these symbols are relative to the start of the program. Okay. So relative means what? Let us just have an example here. So let us assume that this is program A and this starts at 1000. Okay. And I have a symbol called as ABC defined. Okay. ABC defined in my program at address 2000. Okay. So we have a program called as A, which is starting at 1000. Um, anyways, uh, so it's starting at 1000 and the value ABC is defined at 2000. Okay. Let us assume that it's a relocatable program. So if this program starts at 2000, then obviously this value is 3000. If this program starts at 5000, this value is 6000, right? Now the value of this label is changing relative to the start of the program. So normally some values in the object program are relative to the beginning of the program. So as the starting address changes, the value of that particular label or that constant is also going to change. Okay. So we need to be careful about these things. So whenever we are using these symbols or constants in your expression, so they obviously are going to play a major role. Hence, the assembler divides expression into two different categories. So one is called as an absolute expression and the second one is called as a relative expression. Now these things are based upon what type of terms you are using in your expression. Okay, so there are two different types of terms that we can use. One is an absolute term which does not change with regard to the program, and second one is the relative term which actually changes with regard to the program. So if it changes with respect to the start of the program, it is called as relative. If it does not change, then it's called as an absolute term. And based on these two, we have different types of expressions. We have an absolute expression and we have a relative expression. Now, what do you mean by this absolute expression? So, an absolute expression uh, is one that uses only absolute terms. Okay, so that uses only absolute terms is called as an absolute expression. So does not mean that it should only contain number. Like for example, 20 minus 40. So this is an expression, right? And this is an absolute term, and this is an absolute term. So not only like this, you can also have terms in your program which are symbols or labels. Okay, so an absolute expression may contain a relative term also along with these type of terms, absolute terms. We can also have relative terms, but when you are forming an expression with relative term, you should ensure that the relative terms are occurring in pairs with opposite signs for them, for each pair, right? So what does it mean? Okay, like for example, check out max length is equated to buffer. Sorry, buffend minus buffer. Okay, so like for example here, buffend, what type of term it is? It is an relative term. Okay, because the value of buffer is going to change with regard to the start of the program. Similarly, we have buffer here. This is also another relative term. So we have formed an expression using two relative terms. Now, what type of an expression this is? Okay, and what type of an expression it is? So this is a absolute expression. Okay, how it is an absolute expression means, so if in an absolute expression, if you have relative terms, then you should ensure that they are present in opposite signs. Okay, or their pair should be present in opposite signs. Like for example, this is present as a positive term, so buffer is actually present as a negative term. So two relative terms with opposite signs paired to each other. Okay, so this is an absolute expression. Got it? So this is how we can actually form an absolute expression. So an absolute expression does not gives an absolute value, and it is made up of absolute terms and relative terms. Okay, absolute term is, for example, buffer minus 40, something like this is there. So this is a relative term, this is an absolute term. Okay, so as I said, but we can't use it like this, because if I'm using one relative term, then I need one more relative term, which is exact opposite of that. Okay, so this is an absolute expression, right? For example, you can see, so an expression can also have only absolute terms. Like for example, max length equated to 1000. Now this 1000 is nothing but an absolute term. Got it? So this is how an absolute expression is formed. Now let us look at relative expression. What is a relative expression? So obviously the relative expression contains relative terms. Okay. Now just like an absolute expression, even relative terms will have pairs of relative expressions will have pairs of relative terms in opposite sign, but except one. Okay, so this is the difference. So except one, other relative terms are supposed to be paired with each other. Okay, so this is how it would look. For example, S tab equated to op tab plus buffend minus buffer. Okay, so this is the expression that has been found. So what type of expression this is? This is a relative expression. Why it is a relative expression? It is a relative expression because you have all relative terms. So here, this is one, this is one, this is one, and in this we have two relative terms which are paired each other with opposite signs. So this is minus and obviously this is plus, except one. Okay, so one of them is free. So this is considered as a relative term, or sorry, relative expression, which is made up of relative terms. Okay, so remember now, an absolute expression comprises of either absolute terms or relative terms. If it is made up of absolute terms, no problem. If it is made up of relative terms, ensure that they are in pair with opposite sign. Okay. Now, what is a relative term? So now, relative expression. So relative expression is one that's made up of all relative terms. Okay. And what is the criteria? Criteria is that all expressions must be paired with each other with opposite sign except one. Okay, except one. So this is the way to build an expression or use expression in your program. Okay, so uh, as I said, even star is sorry, this is repeated. Okay. Now, when it comes to handling the expression, how does the assembler handle the expression, or how does it know that this is an absolute expression and this is a relative expression? So it needs to keep track of the symbols that are defined. So how does the assembler handle the expression and its types? So to find the type of expression, what we'll do is we'll keep track of the type of symbols that are being used. Okay, like for example, you can see that here is a snapshot of the symbol table. Remember that symbol table is used to store all the symbols that are defined in your program. Symbols or labels that are defined in your program. So we remember that symbol table comprises of name of the symbol, value of the symbol, the length of the symbol, right? So then other information, address assigned for the symbol. So all the information that is required to perform the assembly process. Now, but now along with that, we will also keep track of the type of the expression. Okay. So what is a type? So type is nothing but whether it's an relative term or an absolute term. Okay. So if it is an absolute term, it will be marked with A. If it is a relative term, it will be marked with R. So when you are framing an expression or when the assembler sees an expression, then it will check what type of terms they are and are they based on the rules that have been that are supposed to be followed when you are forming an expression. So if that is the case, then the expressions are correct and evaluated. If not, the assembler is going to raise an error. Okay, so this is how expressions are actually handled. Okay. Now the next concept is the concept of program blocks. Okay. Now till now, the program that we have seen or encountered, which is this one, uh, the sample program that we have considered. So it is actually written as a single program. Okay, so look at this. This is a single program, right? So there is a start assembler directive here and continues continues further, and there is an end assembler directive here. So it is a single program, right? Now in this program, if you had observed, we have considered two or three statements which are using format 4 or the extended format instruction or direct addressing. Okay, so which are those instructions? It is this one, this is 2, and this is 3. Now what is the reason behind using extended format instruction? Okay, I'll just explain. Let me assume that this plus is not there here. Okay, so we already know that the JSUB value is 48. Okay, so I'll just try to assemble the instruction using PC relative addressing mode. Okay, so 4 and then 8 is 1000, but of course we have to put 11 for NI because we are neither using immediate or indexed addressing mode. Okay, sorry, indirect or immediate addressing mode. So X, B, P, and E. Okay, so no X, so it is 0. No B, so it is 0. I'm assuming that we are using PC relative addressing mode. So P is equal to 1, E is 0. Okay, now I need to calculate the displacement. Okay, so I'm assembling this instruction means this is A. So PC value is A minus what is the value of read record? Read record is 1036. Okay, it is 1036. So 1036 minus A. Okay, which is 1036 minus 10. Okay, so I'll just assume that it is 1026. Okay, I know it is wrong, but I'll just assume that it is 1026. Okay, now can I put this displacement here? Can I put this displacement here? Okay, so displacement is 12 bit, but I've got a displacement of 1026. So what does it mean? I've got a 4 bit, 16 bit value. I can't fit 16 bit value in a 12 bit value. Okay, so obviously the displacement is too large. So that's why I can't fit in using a format 3. Got it? So that's why we have used V in the sense, that's why at the beginning itself, because we know that the displacement is going to be large, we have actually put a plus sign here and assembled this instruction using format 4. Okay. So why it is having a larger displacement is because of this place here, which is a buffer. Right? See here, we are reserving around 1000 bytes of memory for buffer. So it's a blank space. So it is something like this. See here, this is a program. So all of this part, okay, up to here, right? Including this. Okay, now we have this buffer. So 1000 bytes. So this is the buffer. Okay, and then the program continues, right? So this is the program till there. There is a large buffer in between, and then read record, and then after that write record. Okay, so this is the main program. So because there is a buffer in between of 1000 bytes, right? So we have an instruction that is present here. If it has to refer here, read record and write record, so it is having a larger displacement. So this is what is happening. Okay. Now, can we reshuffle our instructions such that this larger area is somewhere arranged here at the end so that all the instructions are closer and all the data are closer? Okay, or in other words, can I use some concept or some feature that can actually group together all the instructions on one side and group together all the data, okay, on the other side? Okay, or they're just grouping together at specific location? Okay, can we do this? Because if you can do this, then in this program that we are considering, not just in this program, in all the programs, what would happen is all the instructions would come together. Okay, so instructions in the sense, this instruction, and this instruction. Okay, so all the instructions would actually come together at one place. all the data that is present here, something like this. Okay, smaller data would come first. Okay, and then all the large data in this is this one, the buffer place. Okay, so this can come here. So what would happen here is now the instructions would actually have a smaller displacement. Right now the instructions would have a smaller displacement because this large area has been shifted towards the end. Okay, but I will write the program like this only, but somehow my program has to be rearranged like this. So this is what I want. Can we do that? Okay, so yes, we can do that by making use of the concept of program blocks. Okay, so what is this program blocks? So program block allow the generated machine instructions and data to appear in the object program in a different order. This is important. Okay, so you might have written program in some order, but you are going to rearrange your program in the object program by using the concept of program block. Okay, by separating the blocks from storing code, data, stack, and larger data block. Okay, this is something like what we do in microprocessor, where we have separate sections or something. We have a what do you call code segments, right? So code segment and stack segment and data segment, right? So like this, there are different segments. So like this, it is possible for us to divide our program, but here we call them as blocks. Okay. Now, how do we divide any program into a block? So we are supposed to use a assembler directive called as use. Okay. So use is the assembler directive, and then you are supposed to specify the name of the block. Okay. So whatever instructions follows, all those instructions are going to be considered as a part of this particular block. Okay. So if you write use A, and then you have some 10 instructions. So all these 10 instructions would belong to block A. Okay. Now after that, for example, if I have use B and then I have 5 instructions. So these 5 instructions would actually belong to block B. Now what if I want to have few more instructions in block A? No problem. Just use A, and then whatever follows will again become a part of the same block A. Got it? So this is how we use the assembler directive use followed by the block name. So if you don't specify a block name, then it is going to be considered as a default block. Okay, it's going to be considered as a default block, and all the blocks are all the instructions that follows are going to be considered as the part of the default block. Okay, so this is how we can divide a program into separate blocks. So how the assembler actually handles is, the assembler is going to rearrange these segments to gather together the pieces of each block and assign address in the object program. Okay, so that is how the assembler is going to do that. We'll see that in an example. So separate the program into blocks in a particular order. So how we are trying to do it is that the larger buffer area in the program that we have considered are supposed to move that to the end of the program. And of course, one more advantage that we get by using the concept is that program readability is going to be affected, of course, in a good way. So this is how, as I said, we are trying to rearrange our program. So the first program or the first part of the program is going to be considered as a default block, which contains all the instructions. The second block, we will call it as C data, which contains smaller data areas, and the C blocks is going to contain the larger data areas. Okay, of course, the buffer which was present here in the program. So how do we do this? As I said, just check this out. I did not mention any assembler directive here. So obviously by default, all of them are going to belong to the default block. Okay, all the instruction that follows in the program are going to belong to default block. Okay, so all these instructions. But check out at line 92, we have use assembler directive. So use, I have put C data. So C data means now this is the second block. So return address and length are going to be part of C data block. Then we have the larger data, right? So for that we have a separate block. So use C blocks. So this and this, all of these are going to be placed at the end. Okay, so this is how we can divide the program, right? Now once again continuing with the program, I want the instructions to be part of the default block. So how do I do that? Use without any block name. So all this belongs to now the default block. Once again, input I have to put it in, use C data. So use C data block, and continuing further, so use without a block name. So all these instructions are going to become a part of the default block. So then all the data items which are placed at the end here, LTORG, so all of them are going to belong to C data, which is this one. Okay, all the literal values are going to be belonging to C data block. Right. So how the assembler now handles this program, a little bit different from what we had seen earlier. So arranging the code into program blocks. So now the program has to be rearranged based on the blocks. Okay, so it will happen in two passes. So during pass one, all these things are going to be performed by the assembler. So what are the things? One thing is separate location counter is going to be maintained for each block, because we need to keep track of every block. Separate location counter is going to be initialized. So we are going to save and restore the value of location counter whenever we are switching between the blocks. I'll show you how. At the beginning, each location counter is set to 0, and we will assign the label values, the address relative to the start of that particular block. Okay, so every block will have its own respective location counter. It's going to start with 0, and every symbol that is present in that particular block is going to be assigned address relative to the starting of the block. Okay, so that is one thing. Then store the block name or number in the symbol table. Once again, symbol table is going to be used in order to store the name of the block and its address that is associated with it. And length is also going to be stored. Okay, why we require length I will explain later. And assign to each block a starting address in the object program by concatenating the program blocks in a particular order. So we want all the program blocks to be one after the other. Like this is the setup that we want, right? So I showed you the diagram. This is the setup that we want. So we want first default block. After default block, we want C data block, and after C data block, we want C blocks. Okay, so this is how we have to rearrange. So for rearrangement, what our assembler is doing is it is keeping track of different location counter. For example, the default block has a location counter 1, C data has location counter 2, and C blocks has location counter 3. Okay, so this will be with the particular block name. So this is the default block, this is the C data block, and this is the C blocks. Okay, so for every block will have its own location counter values. Okay. So during pass 2, what will happen? So address will be calculated for each symbol relative to the start of the object program by adding two things. One of the thing is the location of the symbol relative to the start of its block is going to be added, and then the starting address of this particular block is going to be added. Okay, I'll show you how. See here, the same program is trying to be assembled. So now we have one extra column here, which is called as block number. Okay, so keep track of the block number here. So we started with the default block, right? So let us assume that the default block number is 0. Okay. So initially the location counter value will be set to 0. So I'll just name it as location counter 1. So it starts with 0. And as usual, you will assign the address. Until what? Until you come across the use assembler directive again. So here it is the starting of a new block. Okay. So change the block number and initialize its own location counter. Okay, let us assume that this is its own location counter. I'll name it as location counter 2. Okay, now you assign the value with regard to this block. Okay, so this is 0. So obviously this one is 0. So this is plus 3. Right, so 0, 0, 3. Now once again we have an assembler directive here, use. Okay, but this is the time to initialize another block, C block. So let us give that block a block number 2 and give its own location counter 3, and start assigning the address. Okay, so if you look further, same thing is happening. See here, use assembler directive is encountered. Okay, So now location counter 1 is supposed to be used because this is the default block. So when did we stop the location counter? See here at 0024. So at 0024 we have one instruction which is J at RET ADR. Now this is a format 3 instruction. So it is 3 bytes. So 24 plus 3. How much? 27. Got it? Okay, so it is now continuing. So block 0 is continuing. Until what? Until you come across one more assembler directive. So previously when it was stopped, check. It was stopped at 3. Okay, here we have length. Reserve word 1. So one word is reserved. So one word means 3 bytes. So 0003 plus 3. How much it is? 0006. Once again the block number has been changed. Got it? So like this, it is going to be assembled. Right? So once the address is assigned, these values are going to be recorded. Okay, I don't know whether the table is present or not. Okay, the table is not present, but this is how it would actually look like. Okay, just check this out. So this is how our program was. We had first part of our main program. We'll consider that as default one. Then we had a C data block. Then we had C blocks. So this was the larger data. Okay, then we had read record, some data items defined in that, then write record, and some data items defined in that. Now what we want is we want default 1, 2, and 3 to be combined. Okay, so default 1, default 2. Okay, in the diagram default 3 is missing. Okay, I think it's present here. Sorry. Okay, and then C data 1 and C data 2 and C data 3. Okay, so this is how the object program is going to be generated. Okay, this is how the object program is going to be generated. Why we don't have C blocks here is because this does not generate any object code. Okay, that's why it's not there. But object program is generated like this. But when the same program is loaded into memory, it will be put like this as per the blocks. Default 1, default 2, default 3, C data 1, C data 2, C data 3, and of course in the end we have reserve word, right? So 1000 bytes is supposed to be reserved. Got it? So like this, the rearrangement is going to take place, and your program is loaded into the memory as separate program blocks. So this is one of the concepts that is present in SIC VARFC, which uses or which rearranges the program as separate segments. Okay, so this is one more thing. Okay, the next feature is called as control section. This is almost similar to the concept of program blocks, but there is a major difference here. Okay, what do you mean by a control section, right? So till now what we have considered is that the program is a single entity. Okay, we have a single entity. Even in case of program blocks, even though we are rearranging the instructions, but still the program is one. Okay, so what if we have separate programs? Okay, what if we have separate programs and these programs are supposed to be combined together and executed? Or is there any way where I can write programs separately but still able to combine them and execute? Okay, so if that is the question in mind, yes, you can do that, but for that you have to make use of the concept of control sections, and later you are supposed to perform program linking. Okay, or you need to give some information in order to perform program linking. Okay, so what do you mean by a control section? We need to identify first. Okay, so assume that a control section is something like a function, okay, that has its own independent existence. Okay, means it is a separate entity. Okay, so this is the definition of the control section. So control section is basically a part of the program, okay, which is obviously a program would actually contain functions. So it's a part of the program that maintains its identity even after the assembly process. Okay, so means it can exist on its own. So each control section can be loaded and relocated independent of others. Okay, so we'll just visualize this. So earlier our program was like this. Okay, so we had the main subroutine we had the read record and we had the write record. Okay. Now when I load this program into main memory, the order of the subroutines are supposed to be same. Okay. So M, R, and after that W. Okay. So even if I load this program somewhere else, the order has to be the same. Right. Now what we are thinking about is, we are thinking about having this program or this part of the program as a separate entity, this part of the program as a separate entity, and this part of the program as a separate entity. So in other words, when I load this in my main memory, something like this, okay, I can load main subroutine here, I can load the read record here, and I can load write record here, anywhere, wherever memory is available. I will load them as independent entities, but still my program should work. Somehow they should be linked with each other, and somehow they should work. So if I want this to happen, then I need to make use of the concept of control sections. Okay. So what I mean by a control section, it's a part of the program. See, all of these read record and write record and main function, all of them are part of the program, but they actually maintain their own identity even after assembly, and they can be loaded and relocated independent of each other. So it does not mean that main has to come first. Read record can come first. Write record can come first, or it can be put in any order, or they can be loaded anywhere in the memory, but still my program is going to execute. Got it? So this is how control section actually works. So different control sections are most often used for subroutines and other logical divisions. As I said, it's something like a function that we use, but they have been written separately. That's it, in separate files or separate programs. So the programmer, what he can do is he can assemble, load, and manipulate each of these control sections separately. So as I explained, it can be loaded anywhere in the memory. Because of this, there should be some form of linking control section together. Of course, as I said, now we have loaded them separately, right? So obviously, we don't know how to associate with them. So some form of linking has to be made. So that is the job of the programmer now. So he is the one who is creating this control section. So his job is to give enough information so that the program gets loaded. Okay. So this is how things are going to work in case of control section, or we have to ensure that it works. Okay. Now, since the control sections are independently loaded and relocated, the assembler is unable to process these references in the usual way, right? So it's quite obvious, because I don't know where the read record function is going to be referred. So obviously our assembler is not going to know this, because the read record function is going to be loaded at runtime. So at runtime, it can be assigned any address. Okay, like for example, I'll go back to the program which we had considered earlier. See here. When I have, no, sorry, not this one. This one, right? Right. So here I have an instruction that refers to read record. Now what we are trying to do is, we are trying to make this entire program as one control section. Okay. So this is one part. Main part is one. This one I'm considering as second control section. Okay. Or this is a complete different routine. And this one is a completely separate routine. So when they were together, read record was assigned the address of 1036. Okay. That's why we had put it as 4B101036. So 1036 directly has specified the address. But now, when this is a separate entity, it can be loaded anywhere. Wherever memory becomes available, it can be loaded. It can be loaded at 1036 also. It can be loaded at 5000 also. It can be loaded at 7000 also. So wherever memory becomes available, this subroutine is going to be loaded, or control section is going to be loaded. So assembler is not going to know that, because it is at runtime. The assembler is not going to know that. So what value assembler is going to put here? That's the question. Okay, are you getting it? So because subroutines are loaded at runtime, our assembler will never know where exactly that control section is loaded. So obviously it will not know what to assign, what address to assign during the assembly process. So that part is not known to the assembler. So this is what has been given here. So since control sections are independently loaded and relocated, it can be loaded anywhere, it can be relocated anywhere. So obviously the assembler is unable to process these reference in a usual way. So it needs to change its way in order to accommodate the concept of control section. So whenever it does not know any symbol or any label, so such references are going to be called as external references. Okay, or anything that is not defined in this control section, but it is defined in some other control section. So those type of references are called as external references. Okay, like for example, I'll just show you the example here. Okay, so before coming to that, I think I should have used the same program. Okay, I'll explain the concept first and then I'll explain that with an example, right? So anything that is defined in this particular control section, not defined in this control section, but referred, is called as an external reference. Okay, I'll give an example here. Let us assume that we have a control section called as A. Okay, now this control section has a label X, Y, and Z, or it has defined these labels X, Y, and Z. Okay, so X is reserved 1, Y is reserved 1, and Z is reserved 1. Now there is an instruction LDA X. Okay, similarly LDB Y, similarly LDT Z, something like this. Okay, so this is the control section A. The name of the control section is A, and here we have instructions which refers to some labels or symbol that have been defined here only. Okay, so this will not cause any issues because the values of X, Y, and Z will be known to the assembler because they are the part of the same control section. Okay, but now let me add one more instruction, LDS W. Okay, LDS W. Okay, this W is not defined in A. Okay, it is defined in a control section called as B. So let me assume that W1, something like this. So LDS W, something like this is here. Okay, so W symbol here is a symbol that is not defined in this control section, but it is being referred. Where it is defined? It is defined in some other control section. It is defined in B, but it is being referred in A. So this type of symbols are actually called as external references, or such references are actually called as external references. Okay, so the assembler would actually generate the information about each of the external references that will allow the loader to perform the required linking. So obviously now, since W is not known, assembler is unable to process this information. So what it does, it will leave the job to the loader. Okay, it has to give some information to the loader such that this value of W is resolved and the instruction is assembled properly. Okay, so this is how some linking has to be provided. So how do we divide our program into control sections? Okay, just like we had used use assembler directive in case of program block, we have to use csect assembler directive in case of control sections. Okay, so this is similarity. We have a assembler directive to divide our program either as program block or as control section. So we have csect. Okay, so control sections differ from program blocks in that they are handled separately by the assembler. Okay, as I said, each control section is going to be considered separate. Okay, now let me. We have time. 5 minutes is there. I'll explain about these two. Okay, no, I'll come back to this. Right. So let us just check this out. This is one assembler one control section, complete control section. So whenever, if it's not explicitly mentioned, by default, when you have start assembler directive, we'll consider it as a default control section. Okay, that is one thing. Now you can observe here, the second control section is defined. So how? csect assembler directive. But in case of use, we write block name before. But in case of csect, the name of the control section is defined first. Okay, so this is the name of the control section, and then csect followed by csect says that this is a control section. Okay, now this is the write record control section, the csect. Okay, what has happened here is it would look something like this. Earlier we had main, we had read record subroutine, and we had write record subroutine. Okay, all of them together is a single program. No matter how you rearrange the statements, it is still a part of the same program. But now what we have done is we have done this. We have main control section, we have read record control section, and we have write record control section. So this is how we have done it. So symbol that have been defined here, if it is being referred here, just a second. Okay, so as I was saying, this is how they are now. So M, R, and W. Okay, so read record, write record, and main subroutine. Okay, so any symbol that is defined here, if it is being referred here, okay, it is called as an external reference here. Okay, this is called as an external reference, right? Anything that is defined here and used here itself, it is called as an external definition. Or in other words, I'll just explain what is external definition and external reference. So it is called as an external definition. Okay, let us look into what exactly it means. So external definition is a statement in a control section, names or symbols called external symbols that are defined in this section but may be used by some other control section. Okay, so this is important. What are external definition? These are the symbols in the program or in the control section that are defined in this control section, but they may be used by some other control section. They are called as external definition. What do you mean by external reference? So it refers to symbols or name that is used in this particular control section, but are defined in some other control section. So used here, defined somewhere. Defined here, used somewhere. Got it? So that's the difference. Okay. So used here, remember this. Used here, used here in this particular control section. Okay, but it is defined somewhere else. So this is called as external reference. Okay. What do you mean by external definition? Defined in this control section, but used in some other control section or referred in some other control section. So that is called as an external definition. Okay. Like for example, just check this out. Okay. Read record. What type of symbol it is? Is it an external definition or is it an external reference? Okay. If it is an external definition, it has to be defined in this control section. So just check, is it defined? No, right? So you can't find read record anywhere here. Obviously, read record is an external reference. Okay. What about write record? So check whether it is defined here. No, it is not defined here. So obviously this is an external symbol. Okay. So we call these things as external symbol. So an external symbol can be either an external definition or a external reference. So here write record is an external reference. Okay. So one thing. Next, check out what has been defined here. Okay, return address is defined, length is defined, buffer is defined, buffend is defined, max length is defined. Okay, so of course all of these things are used in this part of the program also. But check this out. Buffer is used here. Buffer is used in read record. Correct. Buffer is used in read record. Length is also used in read record. But have they been defined here? Check this out. Have they been defined here? No. So what do they make? This will make them a external reference. Okay, this would actually make them a external reference, but they are external definition in this control section. See here, they are external definition in this particular control section because they have been defined here but used somewhere else. Okay, in this case, it has been defined somewhere else but used here. So this is external reference. So these things are external definition. Okay. Now the way to indicate which is external reference and which is external reference and external definition is by mentioning the labels or symbols with the assembler directive extdef and extref. Now this is the job of the programmer. So he has to mention that these are the external definitions that are defined here and may be used somewhere, and these are the external references that are used here, but it has been defined somewhere else. So this information will actually help the assembler and the loader in order to perform the program linking. Okay, so how do the assembler performs this program linking, or how does it pass this information to the loader? That we shall discuss in the next session. Okay, just a second, I will take the attendance. If you have any doubts with regard to the concept we have discussed today, you can ask.